impactful but appealing to everyone, and just kind of signifies a fresh new start, or to keep the theme going, a new chapter in our story, because it's been quite a year. We've had the global pandemic, we've had new staff come in, we've grown massively, we've had USA Today and Canadian bestsellers. It's just been incredible. So this is going to be a quick look at what we want to achieve at One More Chapter and what we've done, and then hopefully end with some really great tips for you. And if you have any questions, please just let me know. So Mel, do you want to go on to the next slide? Yes, we are One More Chapter. So we like to see ourselves as a boutique publisher. We're a small division within the huge HarperCollins global family. But being small is not a bad thing. In fact, as they say, the best things come in small packages. And it means we can be nimble, quick, forward thinking, and we're really ambitious. But most of all, we're really passionate about books and reading and our authors. Do you want to move on to the next? So yes, readers and stories are at the heart of everything we do. So without our authors, our incredibly talented authors, and without the amazing books they write, we wouldn't have anything to do. It would just be Mel and me and Claire, Beth and Hannah, all just sat around basically doing nothing with our day. We couldn't do it without the incredible books we have. And one of our absolute favourite things is to share the books we love with our readers and to talk about them as well. We love nothing more than waffling on about our favourite books, our favourite genres, our favourite characters, what we're reading at the moment, what we're loving. And it's, as I said earlier, it's just so lovely, and even more so at the moment, to be able to kind of hear from you guys as well, and have, it really feels like a proper conversation, even though we're not together, even though we're all around the country, maybe even all around the world. It's lovely just to be able to speak to you guys and see you all online and hear your message, like read your messages. We're also story seekers, so aside from working with our authors as well on the books that they want to write, we also look at kind of what are the stories we want. And this can come from anywhere. It could be, you know, one of us thinking, oh, do you know, I haven't read like a really funny rom-com in ages that's like 10 Things I Hate About You, or some film I've seen on Netflix, and I'd love to read something like that. And we can then look at like the current authors we have, we can then reach out to new writers, and we'd love nothing more than working with you on new stories and really kind of working as a team from the very beginning. So we're happy for writers to come with their own books and their own ideas as well. But what we really love is working as a team right from the very beginning to make sure that the books are what we want to read, but more importantly, what all our readers and everyone globally from any background want to read as well. And we are global, so it's not just us here in the UK. I mean, at the moment, Bethan's up in beautiful Scotland, Hannah's in Reading, Claire, Mel and I are in London, Kim's in Windsor. The rest of the team are quite spread out, but we reach readers and writers around the world as well. So we're pushing our books, we're talking about our books continuously everywhere, and it's been an incredible year where we've seen not just one USA Today bestseller, but many USA Today bestsellers. And also our amazing team in Canada have been getting our books into the charts over there as well. So it's really exciting that we can reach readers not just in the UK but anywhere around the world too, and we'd love to hear from you as well. So if you've read one of our books in Canada, or if you're in the States and you've seen one of our books in Costco or Walmart, please get in touch and tell us what you think. We'd love to hear from you. So that's a little bit about One More Chapter and who we are. Now we're going to go on to the submissions process for any wannabe writers out there, or anybody who wants to kind of get involved a bit more with One More Chapter. I know the submissions process can be incredibly daunting. I haven't written a book, so it's not something I myself have had to go through from the writer's perspective, but I imagine it's like applying for a job. And we get so many submissions in, the competition is huge. So this is really to look at how you can stand out from the crowd, and how can you really grab our attention from the very beginning. So I hope you find these tips useful, but if there's anything you want to know more of, just let us know in the comments, and I'll be happy to try and answer them too. So, submitting for success. So we've put together a little checklist for your submission. So we do ask, so the first point is your manuscript complete? So on the whole, we do ask for a complete manuscript. It just makes it's easier to assess the book in a way. We can take 3 chapters. We get a good sense of your voice from 3 chapters, but it's really hard to see where the story's going from only a small chunk of your writing. Which is why having the whole manuscript is actually probably more helpful, because we'll be able to read the whole thing, look at any issues that might crop up, or you could start off quite slowly but then have an incredible ending, or you could have an amazing beginning and then it slightly goes downhill towards the end, and that's for us to be able to assess and take into consideration, and look at your voice as well, and then see what we can do to help you. Because the other thing too, what I think it could be a good way to look at the submissions process actually is what you can get out of it. So obviously that what everybody wants is a book. Whoever's submitting, the number one goal is to get a book a book deal. But I'd also encourage you to really kind of think about what can you get out of this process? So what can you take away? What can you learn from? And our job as editors is to hopefully give you feedback that will inform your writing moving forward, and help you just look at the next steps in your writing career as well. I remember hearing, I can't remember who said this, but I really believe this as well, is writing is something you need to practice at. So the more you write, the better you're going to get. So as disappointing as a rejection can be at the beginning, try not to let that crush you too much, because really what you're going to get from that rejection is going to be so important and useful for your book, for your next submission, for your writing journey. And it's also really good to remember, look at those famous authors, really big authors who got rejected so many times before they got their book deals. And it is a case of please try again, and the more you write, the better you'll get as well, and the more you'll learn. Point number 2 is it as clean to read as it can be. So a lot of these tips I'll talk from a personal point of view, because the other thing to remember is all editors are different. We're all very different people. We all have different tastes, but we also all have different what makes us tick and what doesn't. So I'm going to be totally honest and say, if an author's voice is really strong, if the story has me hooked and I'm completely engaged with it, then I don't notice the typos and the grammar as much as maybe other editors do. I get completely swept up in the story, and that's the kind of editor I am. Other editors will find it really hard to engage with a story if there are typos or errors. So really what we're looking try and don't put too much pressure on yourself. I think that's a really important piece of advice in this whole process. Don't put yourself under too much pressure, but try, if you can, to make sure your submission, and this is point 3 as well, is presented as well as it can be. You've done the best job. So using a spell checker on Word, although sometimes I think the spell checker on Word gets it wrong. I'm sure, I don't know if people, as I said, I'm not like the best person on grammar, which is why it's a good thing we have copy editors and proofreads, that it's not just left up to me, because that is an area that isn't one of my strengths, I have to admit. But try, yes, just basically make sure, especially in kind of the opening chapters, that first chapter is so important, in your covering letter, even in the little email, that there aren't too many mistakes in there. And then have you done your research? Now this is one that I find really important. So what we mean by this is, do you know who you're submitting to? Like, do you know what the imprint is, what the imprint publishes, who the editors are, which editor you want to submit to or work with, what they like, what they don't like, what they're looking for, really importantly. I try not to let you try and always keep an open mind when you read a submission, but I have to say, if you open a submission that is addressed to, and I think I'll go into this a bit later as well on another slide, that it's addressed to another division name, or it's addressed to Sir, and I'm not a man, or it's non-fiction, and you're an editor for a fiction publisher. It's incredibly frustrating, because there are so many submissions. We just get so much to read, and to start off on a like basically where you feel the author hasn't really connected with you, and hasn't looked up what you do, can be quite frustrating, because you think, well, if they haven't taken the time to find out as much as possible about the division, why am I going to take the time to read through the manuscript and get back to them with useful feedback? Sometimes, like, that's not to say we don't, but it's just a frustrating thing, and especially if the book isn't. So at One More Chapter, we're looking for really commercial, page-turning reads, fiction, crime and thriller, romance, historical. And if you're sending in a non-fiction book, we still need to take the time to get back to you, because you've sent it in and you've spent that time considering the submission, and you're thinking, well, this is non-fiction, like, we don't publish non-fiction, don't send it to us. So really make sure you've done that research as well. Don't send in anything that we don't want. Even if you've seen a list of what we're looking for and you say, oh, I know you're not looking for this, but like, please try and remember that we're telling people what we're looking for a reason, so we don't have the submissions that we can't help and we can't do anything with, really. So I'd say research is really important, and you also want to engage with the editor. So if you're calling us Sir and we're not a Sir, it can just be a little bit off-putting at the beginning. And then the final point is, have you got your pitch at the ready? So the pitch, this can be a tricky thing. It's what we look at a lot in our day-to-day jobs in editorial. It's basically, I would nail it down to like one line that is going to sell your book in like seconds. So if your book was on a shelf in a supermarket, or if it's there on Kindle or Audible, and a reader has all these other titles to consider, to buy, to look at, you're competing with hundreds and hundreds of books. What is going to grab the reader's attention in like 2 seconds? And in this case, what is going to grab the editor's attention in the quickest way possible? And that could be anything from, you see this a lot, probably as readers as well, like for fans of, say, Eleanor Oliphant, or this is, Karen Swan meets another author. That's one way to pitch your book. You can compare it to books that are doing incredibly well, that people have read and loved. You can compare it to them, but also give it a fresh twist. So for one we've had recently, which is Catherine Freeman's book, Up Close and Personal, the pitch for that was The Bodyguard, the movie, but with a gender swap. So the female character was the bodyguard and the male character was the actor. And you can say, like, so that would be the bodyguard with a the bodyguard with a fresh twist on gender or something, and that will really get the person thinking like, oh, I wonder what that is. I know what the bodyguard is. I know that film. I wonder what the twist is going to be, or how is it going to be different? And that's kind of how you want to grab. The pitch is really about kind of grabbing the editor and the reader's attention. So when we're publishing books, we have to really think about what our readers want, what's going to make them take notice. And it's the same if you're submitting. If you can, it's really helpful to be able to get that very clear one-line pitch in at the beginning. So we know exactly, you sort of grab our attention from the very beginning. An editor will be going through submissions, and then they'll see, let's think of another example. Sure, off the top of your head, it is a hard thing to do. So again, don't put that pressure on yourself. Off the top of my head, I can't even think of one. But just have a think about where it fits in the market. If there are any books, if readers love a certain, or if because they've loved Katie Ford's books, or they've loved Angela Marston's crime series, or things like that, then it's always good to kind of put that in. And it really shows that you've been looking at what readers are enjoying and what they're loving as well. And that's so important, because really it's all about publishing. Is all about, yes, we're a company, yes, it's about making money, yes, it's about making money for the author, but like at its heart, it's about connecting with other people. And I went to this really great talk about 2 years ago with he was the vice president of consumer insight for Sony, and he said this quote that's just stayed with me, and it was, make shit people care about. Excuse the language. And basically what he was saying, if you create something that people care about, they'll talk about it, they'll engage with it, they'll then share it. So for me, that really resonated, because every book I publish, I want a reader to care about it, and I want a reader to take something from it and love it. So we really need to, the pitch in a way is really drilling down to what it is that you want the reader to take away from it. And it could be that it's going to make them smile. It could be that it's going to scare them, that they like so much that they have to put the book in the freezer. Friends reference. It could be, like you want the reader to escape into another world. And really kind of thinking about that in your submission, I think, is important. So that as editors, we can sort of see what you're trying to achieve as well, because it really is about working together as a team. If we offer you a book deal and we publish it, it has to be like, I feel our visions have to match. So my ideas for your book have to, like, what's the word? They have to be compatible with what you want. I think it gets into a very tricky situation if you and the editor, if me as an editor and an author or a writer have very different visions for the book. It can kind of, you're just sort of splitting your focus, and you're moving away from really what the readers are wanting. So this is kind of, guidelines. As I said, though, please don't put too much pressure on yourself. What we really want to see is, passion. And we're going to come on to that in the next slide, please, Mel. So yeah, what do we look for in a pitch? So I've sort of touched on that a bit already, but I'll go into it in a bit more detail now. So a book that starts with a bang. That first chapter, it makes it so much easier to keep reading. At the end, okay, let's go back to the beginning. Instead of thinking of us as editors, I would think of us as being your first reader, or a reader if you've already shown your book to some other people, friends or beta readers. An editor is merely a reader, and our job is to provide a fresh perspective and objective view of your book. So as an author, you've created this incredible world. Like, and let's not forget, being able to write a book is an amazing achievement. I've never done it, and the thought of writing 80,000 words is, I just am amazed. And you're creating something from scratch. You're creating this world and these characters, and you know everything about them. And what our job as an editor is to be that first fresh reader who doesn't know that world, who will read your book with an objective eye and point out the things that you might have missed. Because you're so immersed in that world, you can easily assume that the reader knows everything that you do, that they know everything about your characters. And it's a really common mistake, even for like published authors who do this a lot. It's really easy to assume your readers know what you know and to then not put that on the page. It can, I think, at times feel like you might be repeating yourself, or you might be, it might feel like too much, too over the top. But it's really important to remember that we don't have access to your mind apart from through your words. So an editor is there, we're just there as the reader, and you need to your book, your writing really needs to grab our attention from the first page. Yes, we can keep reading because I think it's easy to, I'll get onto this. Maybe actually, no, this kind of fits in with this point as well. It's easy to write yourself into a book, and you can be tempted to sort of do a lot of scene setting, a lot of exposition, and it can almost take writers quite a bit of time or a couple of chapters to almost warm up into the story and then get going. And that's why you'll often see advice saying, do you know what, write your first chapter, write your first 3 chapters, then go back, delete that first chapter, because that first chapter is probably not actually necessary. And as editors, we know that's an easy thing to do. So we can keep reading. If a book is taking a little bit longer to get going, we will be able to read to the end to see, if there's potential in the voice, if it does get going, if there's this incredible middle or an ending. But again, it doesn't hurt to really grab our attention from that very first page and hook us in. We've got a lot to read. We get a lot of submissions. Fortunately, we don't have as much time as we want. There aren't enough hours in the day to be able to sit and read and go through submissions in as much detail as we want to. So starting your book off with a bang is really important. That first line, that first paragraph, that first chapter is probably the most important thing you can write. And what you really want to do is, as I said, just grab hold of the reader's attention and not let go. Ensure that they are going to turn the page or start the next chapter. So there are lots of ways you could do this. You could do this with a really killer first line. I think there's probably lots of things on Google about books that start with an amazing first line. In fact, in one of our meetings yesterday, we were talking about the first line of The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which is just so gripping. Do you know what we looked at yesterday because I'd forgotten it? As the snow starts to melt, Bunny's body. It talks about the characters. Basically, the body is the snow is revealing a body, and that's bad for the narrator and the other people he talks about. So you immediately get that there's been a murder. You don't know who it is. Well, you know the name of the person who's been murdered. You don't know who they are. You don't know why they've been murdered. You don't know who has done the murder. You don't know why they've murdered him. And that idea of the snow melting is like a ticking time bomb. It's really gripping and totally throws the reader right into this world. It starts right in the middle. In fact, it almost starts after, it starts after the event. The murder's already happened. I think it's just we're talking about how it's just a really clever, gripping opening. And that's the kind of thing you're aiming for. So in quite a few submissions I see, as I've talked about this already, it can be really easy for an author to write themselves into their books. And it's almost kind of, as I said earlier, the more you write, the better you get. It's a sort of practice, almost like you need to train. In the way that you would train for sport, you kind of need to train as a writer as well. And you have your warm-up. Some writers need their kind of warm-up chapters where you're like feeling the characters, you're getting into the story. And whilst all that detail is really good, you're maybe explaining their backstories, you're telling the reader where they are, what the setting is, what they're doing, maybe even like the day-to-day, like what their daily routine is. That's all really important for you and for knowing that for the world that you're creating. But as a reader, like, we don't need to know that yet. That's all stuff that you can feed in, you can weave through your manuscript. What we need is something that is going to hook our attention straight away. So starting in the middle of, or the middle of something happening, or starting like at the point where something is about to happen, just makes it so much more attention grabbing, because it leaves the reader with questions. And you want to answer those questions. You don't want to kind of keep those questions unanswered, because that's frustrating for the reader. But you want to leave a bit of mystery at the beginning, so that the reader or editor needs to know what's going to happen next, needs to know who your characters are. And I'd say one piece of really great advice that I had was every action your character does should be pushing the story forward. Every scene you write should be moving the story forward. So you can have what I call nice to have scenes. They're lovely pieces that you've written. As I said, it could be about like the daily routine of a character. She's making a cup of tea, she's putting the toast in the toaster. And in fact, I used this in an example in some feedback I gave to a submission last week. So if you're watching this, it was me who wrote that. I hope it was useful. But you can kind of, you're making a cup of tea, the character's making a cup of tea, she's having a piece of toast, she's getting up, she's going on a day. Like, okay, that's nice. We all do that. But what is, it's not really that engaging, because it's something we're familiar with and we know. But if your character is making a cup of tea because something awful's just happened and she needs to, everything's solved by a cup of tea, or she needs to take a moment, or maybe she's making a cup of tea because something's about to happen, and she needs to do something to kind of try and calm herself down, and the reader's thinking, okay, well, what is going to happen, or what's happened? It's just a lot more intriguing, and you'll find, as a reader or as an editor, you'll want to keep reading. So yeah, start the book. I'd say that's probably one of the most important, a book that starts with a bang. So really make sure that opening line, paragraph, chapter is asking questions of your readers and drawing them into your story. And also that it has a point, that there's a point to what your characters are doing. Next point is a strong, distinctive author voice. So this one's more about kind of you finding your own voice as a writer, I think. The way I think it can work is there are a lot of genres, as we know, and you are writers writing in similar genres and writing similar stories, crime and thriller, romance, you kind of get that there's going to be a happy ending. Crime and thriller, you on the whole, you know there's going to be a murder. You're right, a lot of writers are writing in very similar areas, but what makes them stand out is their voice, and how they're writing it. So it feels different when you're reading it. It doesn't feel like you're reading another I'm trying to think how I can describe this better. I guess you're trying to avoid something that feels generic when you're reading it. And for an editor, you know, we're reading hundreds of submissions. Throughout our careers, we probably read thousands of submissions. And what you're looking for is a voice that you haven't heard before. So it's a voice that is writing in an area that you know readers love, but it's also a voice that you've never heard before. And it has its own unique style. And I think you can get that. I think, again, it's not about putting that pressure on yourself. It's about finding your natural voice. So some of my authors, there's such a range as well. Some authors will have creative writing courses where they'll teach you to write like absolutely spot on, grammatically correct, brilliant. You know, they'll teach, like, there's so much you can get from a creative writing course. But there are also authors that don't write, that haven't done creative writing courses, and they are writing kind of in the way that they tell their story. Like it's like they're next to you telling their story, and they can be both. There's no right or wrong, but they can both be equally compelling in their own right. And I think if you're a writer and you're thinking, oh God, I've never written a book before, or I've never done a course, or I didn't even do English at uni, or I didn't go to uni, like that really, what this point is to try and encourage is like, actually that doesn't matter. If you have a story to tell, get it on paper and your natural voice will shine through. Also, try not to be like, yes, you can compare yourself to other popular authors in terms of the genre and the story, but don't try and be that author. It's really important that you are yourself in your writing, because that's where we'll pick up on a really distinctive author voice. And if it's a voice we've never heard before, then that is so exciting, and that's again another factor that keeps you reading and keeps you turning the pages. So on to the next point. Because I'm on my mobile, I'm afraid I can't really see any of the comments coming up, but I think Mel will be able to, at the end, will take questions if there are some, and hopefully I'll be able to see it then. So next point, a fresh twist. So this is kind of what I was talking to you about before with the pitch. Taking something familiar but telling it in a very different way that no one's done before. So like Catherine Freeman's The Bodyguard example, up close and personal. That was, we've taken the Bodyguard movie, but the twist is the gender roles are reversed. So she is the bodyguard, and like, why can't you do get female bodyguards, you do get female close protection officers. He is the actor, you do get male actors, and there will be scenarios where they probably need a female bodyguard, and that's really exciting because it's not something that has really been done before. So you're sort of thinking, oh, I wonder how that would work and how the chemistry would work. And in romance in particular, chemistry is really important. So if there is a way that you've got a fresh twist, or if there's a way you can basically make your story sound unique and different, then absolutely make sure that's in your pitch, your covering letter. We can do. And then finally, passion and personality. So this is just kind of, again, I can compare this to probably writing a CV. I remember having to write a CV and you get told how to write it, and this is what you're supposed to put, and it's all quite formal. But actually, a CV is kind of like the covering letter. And in your covering letter or email, even when you're emailing a submission in, you're going to have to send an email, and you can either have the covering letter separate and a short couple of lines about what you're sending, or you could put your covering letter in that email, in the body of that email. And what you want, it shouldn't necessarily be that formal, because what we're doing is something really creative As I said, it's all about engaging the readers. It's what the readers want. It's either giving them escapism, making them laugh, making them cry, making them scared. Like, it's a really, we're so lucky to work in such a creative industry, and personality is so much part of that. We kind of want to know who you are, and that will help us with your writing as well. And that's also another way, like, we can help you find that distinctive voice I was talking about by knowing a bit more about your personality. And this isn't to say that you have to share all the details of your life or anything, but what we really want to see is that passion, why you love writing, why you're writing this book, what inspired you to write this book, like, who are you inspired by even. Again, the research, that really important aspect comes into it, because it could be, you love it. Why do you want to write for one more chapter? What is it about us that you've seen that you really love and would love to be a part of, and why? And it's not necessarily about telling us everything that happens in your book. We do ask for a synopsis as well, and I know that's a hot topic. Some authors can feel very daunted by a synopsis, but again, it's not about telling us everything that's going to happen per se. It's about what a reader is going to feel reading your book, and the emotion, and all of that should really kind of be infused, like, throughout your submission, in your writing, in the manuscript, in the synopsis, and in your covering letter or email. It should really show, like, your personality and the emotion we're going to get out of your book. So I hope that makes sense. But it's really important, because it just makes you feel more like a real person. You are real people, but when, as an editor, you're getting hundreds of submissions, you kind of want to know a little bit more. You want to have that connection. This is all about, as I said earlier, making shit people care about. So make us as editors care about your submission. And you can do that by putting your passion and your personality into your submission, in the covering letter, in the synopsis, and in your writing. So next slide, please, Mel. So this is the steer clear of. So I've kind of touched on this a bit. There's a lot of, like, what not to do when submitting. To be honest, I think that's changing quite a bit, because I feel we should be, accessible for everyone, and anyone should be able to feel, anyone can write a book. And if you have a story you feel strongly enough to tell that you've written a book, you should be able to submit to us. But these are just a few of the bugbears that I've touched upon already, like not knowing who we are, calling us sir. When I get a submission saying, "Dear Sir," I'm a bit like, I'm not a man. And you obviously haven't really looked up who I am, like what I'm looking for, what my list, what one more chapter does, who we are. Like, you're not kind of, again, it just shows you're not doing the research. But the biggest pet peeve I have, more than being referred to as a man, is actually the name of another publisher. If you're like, so for instance, "Dear Penguin, Random House," I'm not a penguin, we're one more chapter. Like, it kind of really shows that you've literally just copied and pasted and sent it out to a load of publishers. And it's just so frustrating, because you're like, well, of course you're going to submit to other publishers, but you also want to see kind of a bit of thought, a bit of care in the submission. Again, like, making us as editors feel like, why are we taking the time to read your submission? So definitely steer clear of kind of those two slip-ups that happen actually quite a lot. And it really is around that point I made about doing your research, and knowing, just targeting who you want to work with, and knowing why you want to work with them. Again, I've talked about this next point already, submitting something we don't publish, so non-fiction. very literary books. I'd say, as much as I love Margaret Atwood, I wouldn't be the right editor for her. My experience is what we call in publishing commercial. And I realise that actually we talk about commercial and literary books a lot. But as outsiders to the industry, it's like, actually, what does that mean? So we tend to say commercial, I would say, like the kind of, not quick reads, but the predominantly books you'll find in the supermarkets, on Kindle, like just really escapist, page-turning reads. They're the books that you pick up and you can't put down. That's not necessarily to say that literary isn't like that, because obviously I've like, Margaret Atwood is labelled literary, and I can pick up one of her books and not put it down. So it is a bit of a weird, like, term, I guess, label. Maybe it's just another argument for why there shouldn't be labels in publishing. But literary books tend to be maybe more intricate, perhaps. It's a different kind of voice, I think, what I'm trying to say very badly. And if anybody else can sum up the difference between commercial and literary, please do, because I don't think I'm doing it justice at all. But it's not my skill set. Likewise, it's not my skill set to edit a non-fiction book. It's not my skill set to edit a picture book. YA there can be crossover YA that definitely you can submit. But if you're sending in, a middle grade or children's picture book, like, I have absolutely no idea how you publish a children's picture book. There's even the illustrations. Like, where do I even start? Or, educational guides, like the references, like bibliographies and things like that. That's just not my experience. So if it's not my experience, I'm probably not going to do a very good job on your book. That's not to say, like, it's not good to read. It's just I'm not the right person. So there will be experts out there in those areas that can read and assess your submission and talk to you from a place of experience and knowledge. So yes, don't submit anything to a publisher that they aren't kind of qualified to assess, really. Again, it's just so important to do that research. If you're writing non-fiction, find a non-fiction publisher or an agent. If you're writing children's, likewise. So giving us deadlines. This is another, so one of the biggest, it's really hard to know how this will change, but one of the biggest regrets I have, I guess, is the amount of submission. I would absolutely love to read every submission that comes into me, like from the beginning, like first page right to the very end, and give really detailed feedback on how the author can improve. But the amount and also the time we have in the day, so we're publishing the books we're currently publishing, we're working with those authors, we're working with all the different teams in the company to get those books published, and then we're getting hundreds of submissions on top of that. It's just impossible to be able to give that detailed feedback to everyone. But what we do try and do is give everyone a fair chance, like a fair shot of getting feedback. Or, we read every submission, and the thing is that will take time. Especially, we're quite a small team at the moment. There's like three of us editors, and we've got hundreds of submissions, and it just takes time. And I know it can be frustrating. I totally understand where writers are coming from if you don't hear back from us for, oh God, I think there's been some where people haven't heard back for a year, and no one feels good about that. Trust me, as an editor, you'll never feel happy about that. And we really try not to leave it that long. But it's sometimes you do get writers that will say, they'll submit, and then they'll come back a couple of weeks later and be like, right, can you give me an answer by like next Friday? And I can I can totally understand where you're coming from, especially if you've got an offer from another publisher. But it doesn't help. It kind of I think it's about keeping us informed, but just also being aware the sheer volume of submissions we get in. And we'll always try and do our best, but we can't always stick to those deadlines, because that could also mean knocking someone else's submission further down the chain, or not having time to look at something else. So it's more like, please bear that in mind. And again, any suggestions on how publishing in general can handle submissions better and not leave such long response times, like, please let me know. But it's definitely something we're working on. Next slide. So what we're looking for now. This changes, again, looking at the research. So we've got our new website, thank you Mel, which looks amazing, and there's about a section on there about the team, and it will tell you who the editors are and what their particular interest in, because I think I've touched on this in other presentations before. It's really important that you have an editor who is super passionate about what you're writing, and knows the reader to target, and you sort of just need that passion to sell anything. And at the end of the day, we're trying to sell books to readers, so it's just worth you looking at the individual editors, who they are, what they like, and kind of seeing where their passions lie, and then you're submitting. So we all have like slightly different tastes, and I think that makes up a really great team. But in general, on One More Chapter, what we're looking for at the moment, really importantly as well, is like writers from any background. We've been publishing is, I've said this again before, publishing is in a bubble. I am personally in a bubble as well, and sometimes we're not seeing the submissions come in from different writers, from and actually that's what we're really passionate and focused on, is to reach everyone. I really believe books should be accessible for everyone, and therefore writing books should be accessible for everyone. And if you have a story to tell, it doesn't matter where you come from, what your background is, like, you should be able to submit. So we're looking for a big focus is just writers who we haven't published before, from backgrounds we haven't published in before, which I think is really exciting. But we sort of, and again, any suggestions on that, it's a big focus of what we're doing. I think with social media you can sort of speak to the same people all the time, so it's up to us to really look for how we can break out of those same channels and find different writers. But in terms of genre, it's all, I'm a personal historical fiction fan. I love it. Historical fiction is doing really well at the moment. I'd love to see more submissions, particularly around untold stories of the First and Second World Wars, strong female characters in history. We published the Mrs. Boots series by Deborah Carr, and I love those books so much, because the Florence Boot is a woman in history who did amazing things, and no one knows that much about her. So being able to bring to light a figure for all the amazing things they did, I think it just adds another element to a historical fiction novel that's really exciting, and I can see readers responding to that really well as well. We're looking for rom-coms, books that make us laugh, really laugh, but again, queer rom-coms, straight rom-coms, anything that just makes us, you want that kind of butterflies in your stomach effect. I think that's why rom-coms are so addictive, because actually the feelings you get from falling in love are really addictive. So any books with that, crime and thriller, psychological thriller, everyone knows, does so amazingly over the years. And we're still looking for, I think this is an area there's a lot of books, it's very competitive. So again, it's really important if you're writing a psychological thriller, like what's going to make you stand out from all the others? What's the fresh twist on a psychological thriller? Crime series, authors who can write quite quickly as well in series. That's a real asset, but you don't have to. Oh my god, do you know what? There used to be. I think during lockdown, actually, I'm going to be honest. Like my thoughts have sort of changed because it's made me really excited that we can reach different readership. So before, there was sort of, I'd say I'd been nervous about publishing paranormal, because we published some in the past and we couldn't find that readership, we couldn't get the sales on those books, and it's really, if a book doesn't sell, it is so disappointing for everyone involved. I mean, it's gutting for the author, but if you're the editor and you've worked hard, like you've bought the book, you want to make it a success. No one buys a book to see it fail, and it's crushing if it doesn't work. And in the past, paranormal has been really difficult, so I've sort of shied away from that a bit more, maybe. But I think now there are more channels to different readerships and different platforms. I think if you've got a really, again, like, it's almost less about genre now and more about that page turning quality. If you can get a reader, get me, one of the editors, turning the page, like page after page, with whatever story you've got, then that's the exciting quality. That's something we want to look at more, and hopefully publish. What else are we looking for? I don't know. Put in the comments what you're writing. I think we'll always try and, as I said, what we have to be sure about is that we can find your readership and that we can make your book sell, because we can't buy books that we don't think we can. No one buys a book to see it fail. So we have to be really sure we can reach the right readers and make those sales. And then I think that's kind of the end. But as I said, I can't actually see